Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk. I like to MOVEit. This talk is about the MOVEit vulnerability and incident response cases I've been working with last summer. As every good presentation, this one starts with disclaimers. So first of all, if I say something stupid, that's me, not Accenture. So you can purely blame on me. The other thing is that I don't want to engage any kind of victim shaming. So I'm going to talk about the victims of this vulnerability and Global ransomware group. So not gonna shame them. They were purely victims on this case. And then, of course, I'm using Madagascar-themed pictures, which I have taken from PNG Wing. All of the rights of the pictures, of course, belong to the DreamWorks, and I don't own them. So, a few disclaimers before we start. So, first of all, I'm gonna introduce the narrator of this talk, which will be me. And like I said, my name is Juho Jauhiainen. I've been working in digital forensics incident response for 10 years. Currently working for Accenture as a security consulting manager. I'm responsible for RITA team. This RITA team comes from the words rapid intelligence and tactical analysis. So we are basically doing malware analysis, threat intelligence, intrusion analysis on the engagements Accenture is dealing for their clients. Well, someone mentioned that they don't have CISSPs. I have a few of them, few certifications I've done during the years. And I'm also actually doing conferences in Finland. So if you're ever planning to travel to Finland, please join this MOVEit, which is held in February every year. It's a super nice and cozy conference, around 2,000 people attending, and it's quite cheap, 50 or 70 euros something for the ticket. Alrighty, so to the actual story. So the bad guys. Who are the bad guys behind the story I'm going to present to you today? They say themselves that they are a top organization offering penetration testing services. So this is what they state on their website, on the Tor network site. But I wouldn't fully agree on that. So originally they were a ransomware group. So they were installing ransomware on the enterprises, and they have been around for a while. They were first seen in 2019. So 5 years ago they started their operations. This is purely a financial motivated group, and they are linked to Russia and Ukraine and other CIS countries in Europe. So individuals living in Russia, Ukraine, of course, the Russian government allows this kind of cyber criminality in their country, so which makes easier to operate if you don't target CIS countries, organizations operating in CIS countries. Majority of their victims are in the US, and later on I will tell where the victims of the MOVEit vulnerability case were, and this is important to remember that the majority of the GLOB victims in general are in the US. So I said that they were originally a ransomware group, which is interesting because nowadays their operation model is a little bit different. They have been using vulnerabilities just to steal the data. They haven't lately been deploying the ransomware. They don't do the double extortion, where you steal the data and then encrypt it and then extort for decryption and also not leaking the data publicly available. So this is interesting. They are only stealing the data, and we will come back later on in this presentation for this. Next one, the enabler. So, like I said, MOVEit is a software that had a vulnerability last year, and it's an MFT software. First time I came across with the MFT in this context, I was a little bit confused because I have background in digital forensics, and in digital forensics usually MFT stands for something totally different. But this time and in this presentation, if I'm referring to MFT, I mean the Managed File Transfer Service. The software itself looks like this. So it's basically this kind of like web-based enterprise tool for transferring data from site A to site B. So just to enable, for example, different locations of the enterprises to share data with themselves. And also in the cases we saw, many corporations were using this software to get data from their clients and subsidiaries to the main corporation. So there was quite business-sensitive information transferred using this service. The software was originally released in 2002, so it's been a while, and you can actually install it on the cloud or on-premise, and all the cases I was dealing with were actually on-premise installations. And the MOVEit or Progress themselves say that this is used by thousands of organizations globally, which I don't fully agree based on the Sodan searches I run. And there is like around 1,600 instances open to the internet. And as we can see, most of the instances are in the United States, but then followed by UK, Germany, Netherlands, Canada, and some other countries as well in Europe. So, like I said, majority of the CLOP victims in general are in the US, but so are majority of the MOVEit users in the US as well. So let's move on to the victims. So who were the victims of this campaign? First of all, I want to say that this, I think this is overused quote by John Chambers, but I think it actually fits this case quite well. So there are two kind of companies, those that have been hacked and those who don't know that they have been hacked. And I still believe that there are many companies that were using MOVEit, but they don't know that they were actually hacked by CLOP. What we saw last year when the vulnerability came out, many companies started patching their services, and they patched like 1 week after the release of the vulnerability. The sad thing is that CLOP actually used exploited the vulnerability like straight away when it was released, and they already stole all of the data when the company started patching. As they stole a lot of data, if you have ever done e-discovery, you know that if you have a bunch of data, it's hard to go through what do you actually have. And CLOP were quite good at it. And they started extorting the companies who are high-value targets. And I believe that there are still smaller companies who have been compromised using this vulnerability, and all of their data stored in the MOVEit has been stolen, but they just don't know about it yet. But yes, well, detecting this kind of stuff is hard. We all know. So basically, this falls to the category where CLOP themselves is letting the company know that they have been compromised. So this falls to the external parties' notification for the companies. And all we know, as we all know, that doing incident response, dealing with this kind of cases is quite expensive. So like the total average cost of incidents like this is in the Scandinavia only $2 million. So who were the victims? CLOP is nice that way that they actually release all of the victims that don't pay. So it's easy to follow which kind of companies and in which countries were fallen to this case. There are super big companies. You can find, I think, 3 of the 4 big fours from the list. So, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if I would see Accenture one day there, because like many companies use these kind of solutions, MFT solutions, not specifically the MOVEit, but some others as well. And on this list, we can see 251 victims. So quite many companies fall to this vulnerability, and I will shortly tell you why they were not able to defend themselves for this case. Previously I showed where the MOVEit is actually used, and the victims on the list are actually following the same structure. So most of the victims were in the US on the list I just showed to you, and some victims followed by UK, German, Netherlands, Canada. So basically, they were using the exploitation, like they weren't targeting any countries. They were just like scanning the internet and owning all the services they were able to do. And also, if we look at the which sectors the companies who were victims of the club are working on, this also supports the theory that this wasn't even targeted to anyone. This was just basically opportunistic way to compromise different companies working in different industries. So, to the actual storyline. What happened? So, the CVE, it's a SQL injection vulnerability, and it was released on last day of May last year. On the 1st of June, CVE was requested for the vulnerability, and actually Huntress, incident response company Huntress, released quite good blog post on the 1st of June, where they told what kind of stuff they have seen in the exploit in this vulnerability. And 2nd of June, the CVE was published. So let's remember the fact that on the last 31st of May last year, the MOVEit said that they released fixes to all supported versions. So it was last day of May. And as if you know, in the enterprises, the patching and fixing stuff is not that straightforward usually. So you need some kind of change management process where you test actually the patches before you deploy them, even though that they would be like emergency patches. So it takes some time in the real world to update things. So, Club basically scanned for the vulnerable MOVEit servers, and when they found one, they exploited it using the vulnerability, the SQL injection, and installed this kind of human2.aspx backdoor to the system. Then, after that, they actually used the backdoor to create a user session, so legit user session there. And using that legit user session, they stole all the data which was stored to the MOVEit instance. Back in the May and June, there was no public exploits for this vulnerability, but later on, last summer, I think end of the summer, Horizon AI released a public exploit on GitHub. So I went through the public exploit and what it does. So basically followed up which kind of requests it sends to the MOVEit server. And as you can see here, it's not like single request PON. It requires many steps so that you can actually use the vulnerability. So I wrote down them on the right side of the slide, and then went back to the incident data we saw and compared. If we can see, this is from a real incident, so which kind of exploitation chain we saw on the logs for the MOVEit server. And as we can see, there are a lot of similarities with the public exploit. So highlighted here, we can see that most of the requests appear on the logs we were able to capture from real case. And then there's, of course, few of them which were not on the public exploit. And I have hypotheses for this as well. So first of all, the first might be checking if the instance is actually vulnerable to this CVE. So they were making sure that the victim has not done any kind of quick fixing there. And then the other one was SQL injection, and hypothesis was that it was used for cleaning up the database. So we saw that many of the SQL, for example, we didn't, even though that the service had query logs enabled, we couldn't see any like SQL injections in the query logs. So there was some kind of like cleanup done by the threat actor during the incident or after exploiting successfully the vulnerability. Then after that, we can see post-exploitation activities. So basically, they were using the backdoor they just installed, and then accessing the backdoor, which is explained next what it does, and then after some time, they started the exfiltration. And one thing I want to highlight from the logs as well is that exploitation started here on the top of this list, and the exfiltration started at the bottom of the list. So it took only 4.5 hours from the initial exploitation to exfiltration, and that's quite fast if you think about your detection and response capabilities. Who can say that we have a SOC that can respond to incidents in 4.5 hours? I think no one. So, the backdoor. And so, it's human2.aspx, and it's not a web shell. When this incident was released, when we saw a lot of public blog posts about it, people were saying that this is a web shell. Well, to me, web shell means some kind of shell that you can use to execute shell commands on the system. But this wasn't that kind of thing. This was targeted only for MOVEit software. So it's waiting for HTTP requests, and when it gets one, it will check the value of X silo comment HTTP header. And this HTTP header contains a string, which is used as a password. So if the password is correct, then it will proceed with the execution. But if the password is wrong, it will return 404 not found to the requester, which makes it hard to identify compromised services in the internet. Basically, usually when we see big campaigns where threat actors are using web shells, and using web shells with static password, it's easy to scan them. I was working before I joined Accenture National Cybersecurity Center of Finland, and when we, for example, saw some big vulnerabilities coming up, we were allowed to scan Finnish networks to see if we can see some compromised services. And when the attackers were using static passwords for their web shells, we were able to identify which servers have been compromised. But now, in this case, Klopp was using unique passwords per client. So we identified multiple of our clients had this web shell on their MOVEit server, but none of them had the same password on the web shell, in the backdoor. So it makes it impossible to scan internet to find these vulnerable, compromised servers. So basically, if the password matches, then it will continue the execution to the next step, which is checking the X-Siloc step 1 HTTP header. And this header has either -1, -2, or null value. So it might be empty or it might have 2 options. And depending on the options, it will decide next what it does. And if the value is -2, it will delete health check service user account. Well, health check service is the login name, but the user name of the account is a random string. And if it's -1, then it will try to get the Azure Blob Storage credentials from the system and lists all of the files that are stored to the MOVEit and sends them back to the attacker. If the value is neither of them, then it will continue to the next step, which is checking the value of X-Siloc step 2 and step 3, which are file name and file folder. And if these are present on the headers, it will deliver file content of that specific file that is specified in the step 2 and step 3 HTTP headers. So it's used to steal only 1 or 2 files from the system, not all of them. And then there's the one that was used the most, which we saw the attacker using, which was the checking if there are active privileged user accounts, listing all of them. If there is user accounts, if there is, it will create the session for them and return it to the attacker. And if not, it will create the user account, privileged user account with the login name health check service, which the web shell or the backdoor can also delete from the system. And when they were using this option and there was privileged user accounts, it was using the lowest, like the first created user account. So for example, in the when we got engaged with these incident response cases, it was usually like some admin who had set up the system in the first place, and they were of course blaming that some internal threat is stealing their information, even though that they were not, they didn't know about the vulnerability, but they saw that someone has downloaded all the files to Russia or some other country. One of the IPs was hosted in Russia actually. So, and one of them was in Canada. So, what can we learn from this case? So, what can you do to prevent yourself getting caught by this? First of all, many of the victims already had a plan. They had a plan, they had a SOC, they had incident response teams, but they still were affected and they couldn't defend themselves. So what should be done? What should be improved? So, first of all, let's look at the timeline. 28th of May, recon. I have seen cases where there was recon before as well, but at least on the cases I dealt with, I didn't see any activity from known CLOP-related IPs to these services before 28th of May. Minutes after the recon, they started the exploitation. And then hours after the exploitation, like I said, 4.5 hours in the one case, they started the exfiltration. And then days or weeks after the exfiltration, they did the extortion part. So guess where the patch was released? Which phase of this one? Anyone? So here. So after the exfiltration, the patch was released. So how would the victims, how could they have protected themselves? So, conclusions. The first and the foremost is that patching vulnerabilities is not enough. When the vulnerability is disclosed and the patch is disclosed, your data may have already been compromised. You need to do some kind of compromise assessment always. Another thing is that threat actors may shift from ransomware to extortion-only operations, which is kind of interesting for the organizations. Usually when you see ransom note on your desktop, it's a clear sign that you have been compromised. What if in the future the first thing you see is an email from the threat actor that, by the way, we have stolen all of your data and you have 24 hours to pay us? This will change the game quite a lot. And we have seen ransomware operators doing this other than CLOP as well in the past 6 months. And then the third one, use best practices. Let me repeat. Managed file transfer service, not managed file storage service. Why would you store your information there? It's meant for transfer only. And there were data from years back in the victim's MFT installation. They are meant for transferring the data, not for storing that. I think my time is up, so thank you very much for listening, and I'm sure if we have time for questions, we do. All right.